In our last podcast, Dad mentioned that 4 bits equals 1 nibble. This bit of trivia...
Ugh, that was horrible.
Yes it was. Anyway, that piece of info led me to deciding that Dad should be captain of the Nibbles.
Yep, that is basically my new name, Captain Nibble. Anyway, today we are going to be working on the GPS component of our Stratoballoon instrument pack.
So, here's our equipment. Our proto-shield, the GPS chip, and its antenna, and, of course, wire.
We started off with putting the ground wire into the GPS chip, closely followed by the power and data lines.
That went smoothly until we tested it.
We hooked it up to a breadboard, and we got 0, 0, 0, and 0.
Yep, instead of our position, we got zeros.
Does this mean we're lost?
Yes, I believe it does. Either that, or it thinks we're sitting in the Gulf of Guinea. So, how do we fix that?
Well, perhaps it's because we're testing the GPS receiver in the basement. Let's try taking it upstairs, closer to a window.
The glass kind, not the Microsoft kind.
Right. However, it appears we're still lost. We're still only getting zeros off the receiver. You okay over there?
Well, yeah. Hey, can I get some data over here? Anyone? Anyone?
Come on, keep it together. Next, we tried looking at the sketch. It was written to get the raw data off the sensor, and then cooked it to turn it into readable longitude and latitude. My thought was to look at the raw data coming off the sensor to see if we really were getting anything useful.
Yeah, don't cook it to the data. Give it to us raw and wriggling.
And Katherine is channeling Gollum.
My precious.
Moving along, staying inside was not giving us any love, so we moved outdoors, and specifically to a south-facing portion of the house.
Since we're in the northern hemisphere, we thought having a clear southern view would help us get a lock on a few GPS satellites easier.
Katherine ran the laptop while I held the Arduino shield and GPS receiver.
After about a minute, the GPS receiver started to blink. Up to this point, the LED had been solid red. After a few more seconds, we started getting data!
And dancing ensued.
Except for Dad, who eschews dancing. Next, it was time to hook up the GPS for real.
The data line for the GPS receiver is a little more sensitive than some of the other components that we've been working with up till now. The documentation said we shouldn't have that line hooked up when we're loading a new sketch onto the board because accidentally setting the data pin high could damage it. So, we decided to build in a switch for the data line.
So, to attach the GPS sensor to our proto-shield, we would need the proto-shield, the GPS receiver, a small piece of strip board, and a small dip switch. Oh, the dip switch would be used to disable the data line while we load a new sketch. Once it was loaded, we would turn the data line back on.
We began by cutting out a piece of strip board large enough to fit the dip switch that we were going to wire in.
Next, I soldered the switch onto the board.
Then we attached the power and ground lines for the GPS directly to the proto-shield. Finally, we hooked the GPS receiver to the strip board with the switch, and then the switch to the proto-shield.
As a result, we've had to revise our original diagram for the GPS receiver.
We loaded up the GPS sketch again, and it worked like a charm. Now the real fun begins, incorporating the GPS code into the rest of our balloon sketch.
How hard can that be?
Well, as it turns out, it wasn't trivial. I don't have time to go through all of the details in this podcast, but it took me 3 attempts to get all of the instruments to play nicely together.
Dad, did you have to get the temperature sensor a timeout?
In a manner of speaking, yes. I'll put a blog post together about it, but you can pull the latest source code down from GitHub. There will be a link to it in the podcast notes.
In the meantime, Dad and I will be studying for our ham radio technical licenses. It's actually a little weird and cool to think that both of us might get call signs.
And then we can talk to aliens, just like Jodie Foster.
You do know that movie was fiction, right?
Let me have my illusions, okay?